Right, guys, welcome to week 6. We are going to be focusing on the hips. So we've been doing lots of hip stuff already, and I've been sort of chatting about the different motions of the hip, the leg bone in relation to the hip, the sort of back in relation to the hips. But the hips are kind of the central point of the body, and they affect what's happening downstream and they affect what's happening upstream. They are a super, super strong joint, and I will be going over in our live classes kind of more of the anatomy of the joint and the movement of the joint, but I want you to know that they're pretty robust, and when we stretch into them, when we strengthen them, all of this is really, really good. So they're sort of the mirror image of the shoulder. The shoulder is very mobile, okay? You got a really mobile shoulder, but this makes it a vulnerable joint, which means that it can get injured quite easily. The hip is a very strong joint, okay? So we can't dislocate the hip very easily. But this means as well, with that strength, means that there's a lack of mobility. So our hips get really, really tight. And after 12 months of being in lockdown, this tightness in the hips, if you're someone who works at a desk, you're gonna really, really feel it. So we're gonna start a pose today on our backs called Supta Baddha Konasana. If you are tight in your hips, I would encourage you to grab some blocks. So coming to lie down on the back, and you're gonna bring the soles of the feet together, okay? Soles of the feet come together like so, and then bring the heels nice and close to the hips. Then you're just gonna let your knees open. Now, if this is excruciating for you, grab your trusty block and just plop it underneath your knee. If it's okay, let the knees dangle, and then bring your hands and place them onto the front of the hips. Close the eyes. Let the knife edge, the outer edge of the feet, become heavy. Notice if there's any kind of shaking or trembling here, under the hands or along the legs. Slow the breath down. Maybe feeling the belly rising and falling with the thumb. And just starting to let go of whatever's gone on in your day so far. Letting go of any responsibilities that await you. And I want you to visualize with every exhale that you're sending that breath to the hips, so to the area where the leg bone and the pelvis connect. And if you can, imagine the knees getting closer and closer to the floor. Now, at any point, if this becomes too much on the hips, you can place the feet on the floor and send the knees up to the sky. But if you can, stay here for about another 10 breaths. Keep sending the exhale to the hips. And then take your hands, place them onto the outer edges of the thighs, and just gently bring the knees back together, and just windshield wipe those knees from side to side, just releasing any tension that you might be feeling here. Nice. And then feet on the floor, grab a hold of your right knee and just draw that knee in towards the chest. You can point and flex the right toes, maybe roll the ankle. Just kind of feeling into how that hip is feeling, pulling it straight into center. And then maybe starting to pull it towards that right armpit, just seeing if you can get a bit more space here if you pull it towards that right armpit. And then go back to center. Notice the kind of restriction that you get there. And then go back to the outside. Good. From here, you're going to take your left hand onto your left hip, and you're going to start to encourage your right knee out to the side. Now, don't let your left butt cheek lift. You want to keep your left hip and left butt cheek down. And with these moves, guys, once you've kind of got your body in the position, stop looking at the screen and take the gaze up, just so your neck's nice and smooth. Opening into that right hip. Nice, and then gently guide that knee back. Now from here, I want you to straighten out your left leg, grab a hold of the knee with your left hand, and your right hand's gonna go out to the side. And then just gently start to encourage that leg over. So just taking a twist here. Don't worry if the knee doesn't touch the floor. Keep your right shoulder down, let your right ear soften to your right shoulder. Just a couple of breaths here. And then gently come back. Let the knee go and just start to move that knee in a few circles. So just moving the knee a few circles one way. Notice if there's any crunching, notice if there's any tightness, any other sensations. And then switch the circle around, coming the other way. You might also fatigue quite easily. Okay, you might feel like, oh God, I don't have the energy to do this. So we're working on stretching, but we're also working on strengthening. Good, and then place that right foot down, bend the left knee, hug that left knee into center, point and flex the left foot. Maybe rolling the ankle a few times one way, and then rolling the ankle a few times the other way. Nice, pulling it straight into center, straight towards the chest. Notice how that feels. And then just guide that knee to the left armpit. So you're just gonna sort of dance between these two positions of the hip and just noticing that when you go out to the side, you can get the knee a little bit closer. And when you go back to center, it might feel a little bit more restricted. So you're just becoming aware of the movement of the hip. And then taking right hand onto that right hip to keep it pressing down, start to let that left knee drop out. I've got more open hips, so I like to take my hand to the inside of the knee to just apply a little bit of pressure, keeping that right hip, the right butt cheek down. Once you're there, looking straight up to the ceiling, so that neck is nice and smooth. Nice, guide that knee back to center, take the knee in the right hand, left hand releases, and then start to pull that left knee over. Take the left ear to the left shoulder, just gently twisting here. Every exhale, just trying to soften and let go a little bit more. Nice, and then come back to center, arms not holding on to that knee. Start to move that knee in a circle, either direction. Trying to get that circle as big as you can so that you're really feeling into the hip. And then switching that circle around, coming the other direction. Noticing if you're getting a bit tired. Good. And then draw both knees in towards the chest. Give yourself a nice big squeeze. And we're going to rock and roll ourselves up and down, either like this, or you can just come straight into tabletop. So we're going to turn ourselves around, finding tabletop position. Again, always thinking about those cues from that very first week. Hands under the shoulders, knees under the hips. Pushing into those arms, pulling forearms towards each other as you broaden across the collarbones, drawing the belly in, looking down, crown of the head reaching one way, and then your tailbone reaching the other way. Good. Okay, we're going to start to move through our cat-cow. So belly starts to drop, your sit bones will rise, and your heart will lift. And then as you exhale, start to come the other direction, pushing the floor away. Good, so this movement should be quite familiar to you now. So I want you to just continue to move through your cat-cows here. But I want you to start to pay attention to the pelvis, okay? So come into cow pose where the belly's dropped. And notice that the belly is soft and your tailbone is shining up and your hip bones are going kind of down towards your knees. This is an anterior tilt. So anterior tilt of the pelvis, the belly's soft. Start to move into cow pose. Okay, so now the tailbone's dialing down. Your hip bones are going up in towards your chest or towards your rib cage and your belly's drawing in. Okay, this is posterior tilt. Continue to move. Anterior tilt, belly releases, sit bones rise. And it takes you into a back bend. And then exhale, posterior tilt. Engages the core, rounding the back. Nice. Continue to move like this. Just feel the pelvis moving. So the rest of the body moves like normal, but just tune into the kind of oscillation of the pelvis, of the hips in these two positions. Nice. And then come back to tabletop. So you stay where you are. I'm just going to turn my position so that you can see what I'm doing. So I want you to take your left leg out to the side. Okay, so you'll be off your mat. Take your left leg out to the side. And then you're going to reach your left arm high to the sky. So you're opening up. And then you're going to thread that arm underneath. And you're going to feel a stretch on the inside of that leg. So left arm is down, left ear is down. And if you want, you can walk your right hand forwards. Try to press the outside edge of that left foot into the floor. So try not to lift off of it. And then just stay here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Push into that right hand. Lift your left hand all the way back up to the sky. Bring that hand down. Bring that left knee in, and we'll do the other side. So right knee goes out to the side, or right foot rather. Turn the toes so they're facing forward, same direction as the head. Left hand presses down, right hand reaches high, high, high to the sky. And then thread the needle, bringing the ear and the shoulder down. Nice. Maybe walking that left hand forwards. Press into the outside edge of that back foot. You might feel this in the hamstring. Stay for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slide that left hand back, push into the hand, lift up that right hand, reach high, 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 and then bring that hand back down. Nice. Draw that knee back in. Good. And then bring yourself back into tabletop position. All right. So we're going to work into the hips, into the pelvis, and into the hip flexors a little bit. So what I want you to do is start to step your right foot forwards, okay? Now, once you're there, bring your hands up. And we're gonna start to sink into our low lunge. So you can see my knees overshooting my ankle. I'm gonna walk my foot a little further forwards. Right, okay, so we're gonna focus on the left hip, okay? So left leg is an extension right now. This means the hip is lengthening. And we're stretching into our psoas, and we're stretching into our rectus femoris. This is the quad on the front of that leg. These guys get really, really tight. Now, you might not feel too much into the stretch here. And what you're gonna notice as well is the tailbone is kind of jutting backwards. So we're in that boof anterior tilt, belly soft, okay? We're kind of like exaggerating that back bend. I want us to come into more of a posterior tilt. So take your hand on the front of your pelvis and the back of your like kind of booty. And now from here, I want you to start to draw yourself back until your tailbone isn't going backwards, but it's going straight down. Okay, so your pelvis is now more kind of straight. Now keep the pelvis straight and start to sink forwards. Whew. And you should feel this stretch really intensely across the front of the pelvis. If you sink, you're gonna lose it. So bring yourself back up. Front hand, back hand, fingertips should be pointing straight down. Then just gently start to sink forwards, but not letting the hips change. We're not letting the pelvis change, that is. So pelvis stays where it is, and you're just slowly starting to send the weight forwards, and very quickly you should get that sensation. Now, if that back knee is feeling a little bit sensitive, you can always double up that mat so that your back knee is supported, okay? So we're gonna stay in this stretch for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Let that go. Bring your hands onto the mat. You're going to shuffle your right foot out to the side and sit your butt down. And we're going to come into a pose called deer pose. So Deer pose is quite simple to come into. You have 2 right angles with your legs. So I want you to get your right shin parallel to the front of your mat. So I'll show you like this. Right shin parallel to the front of the mat and left shin parallel to the side of the mat. Okay, so 2 right angles with the legs. And then look forwards and you're going to start to fold over your front shin. Now you might only be able to come this far. You might be able to come further. You might be able to get the forearms on the mat. If you feel anything funny in the knees, flex the feet and just stay. Okay, you can always use a block under the head as well if you need to. You have 2 different hip positions here, 2 different leg positions. Right leg, don't look at me, just stay in the pose. I'm not even doing the pose right now. Right leg is in external rotation. And as we fold forwards, we're bringing the leg into flexion. And back leg is going into internal rotation, okay? So 2 different sensations, 2 different positions. As you lay here, just notice the difference. Notice how they feel, what leg you feel it more intensely in, and maybe where on the pelvis you feel it. Is it the back, side, front? Good. Staying here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, rise up. Now I'm going to challenge you. Okay, so I'm going to turn on a little angle. You're staying in deer pose. Take your hands to either side of your right hip. Okay, to either side of your right thigh. So hands are on the floor. Then start to press your foot down, your left foot, and see if you can lift your right knee. And not by your, oh my goodness, left foot's pressing down. See if you can lift your left knee. Okay, right leg is doing nothing. Okay, so you're just going to see if you can lift. Now, don't worry how high you lift. And what I want you to avoid doing is leaning to the side to get the leg to lift. So I want you to try to keep your torso as straight as possible. And you're just going to see if you can lift. Okay, you're going to feel these outer glute muscles really working, okay? Glute mid and min are working here. And we're bringing that leg into external rotation. Okay, this is our abduction. Bringing the leg away from the body. Good. Okay. Little bit harder. We're now going to work into internal rotation and adduction, but it's going to be quite challenging. So you're going to press your left knee down and you're going to see if you can lift your left foot like so. Now you can see my foot is barely coming off the floor. You are very much going to want to lean. Keep the torso centered. Even if you feel like you're in complete paralysis. We're working first on getting that mind-body connection. This can be extremely frustrating and you can literally feel like there's no chance that that back foot will lift. You can see if you look to the side of your leg, you can see the hip muscles working here. We'll go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, nice one. Sit back and just windshield wipe those knees. Windshield, windshield, windshield. Good. Nice. You're going to bring yourself back into tabletop. So hands on the floor, knees on the mat. Again, if you needed that padding, just make sure that your left knee this time is on that double side of the mat. And we're going to step right knee is on the mat. And you're going to step your left foot forwards, okay? Take your time. Get yourself there. If you need the blocks to help you up, grab them. Alrighty, so starting to sink into that anterior tilt. Again, maybe walking that foot forwards. So you're going to really feel the belly release. You're going to feel the tailbone shoot back. And you can be quite like lazy in this. This is what a lot of yogis constantly do. They just dump in. But you're not going to get that stretch on that front line of that hip flexor. So I'll show you from the front. So now, okay, start to bring yourself back up. Hand on the front and the back of the pelvis. Tailbones dialing down. Belly slightly drawing in. Then keep the pelvis in this position and start to sink forwards. You should start to feel this along the front line of the hip. And even if you poke into that area, you might even feel that muscle like getting really, really tight. Okay, so pelvis stays where it is. You're barely going to be able to come forwards. And a lot of yogis don't like to do this because they feel limited. But remember, it's sensation over destination. Are you getting the stretch when you're here, or are you getting the stretch when you're here? And this is because of the tilt of the pelvis that it's targeting that hip flexor so much more. Good, let's hold for 5, 4, 3, breathe, 2, 1. Nice. Okay, so we're going to come back into that deer pose. So you can slowly just start to shuffle your way down. Okay, this time, just spin around, lengthen my mat out. So this time your left shin is forwards and your right shin is along the side of the mat, okay? Look at that left shin and slowly start to come forwards, okay? Your legs, your hips are in different positions now. Now left leg is in external, back leg, right leg is in internal rotation. So start to come forwards, doesn't matter how low you go. And just keep trying to track the torso over the center of that shin bone rather than over the thigh, okay? So over the center of the shin bone. And again, if those knees are feeling at all sensitive, flex the feet, okay? If it's too much, bring yourself up higher. We don't want to be stressing out those joints in any way. Keep breathing. Good. Rise yourself back up. Alrighty, so we're going to do the same lifts and lowers with the knee and the foot. Hands come to either side of the left thigh this time. Now we're going to start with the easier one, that external rotation. So you're going to press your foot down and you're going to see if you can lift your knee. I'm now using my right leg, which is my dominant side, and it is so much easier to lift and lower, okay? Because my left side is my less dominant side. It's a lot weaker. Again, make sure you're not leaning to the side, so keep that torso really upright. You want to be isolating these muscles, okay? If you're leaning, you're helping, where we want to really target the strength of those muscles. We'll go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Knee down. You're going to press through the knee. We're going into internal rotation, really challenging. And we're going to try to lift that right foot. Try not to lean to the side. Ready when you are. Just see if you can get any lift here. You can see I'm literally coming a hair off the floor. Try to keep the momentum of the chest, of the spine in a neutral. Go for 5. Woo, 4. Not uncommon to get a cramp here, okay? So you can punch it out, like literally get your hand into the cramp and just kind of push around. 3, 2, 1. Nice. Lean the weight back, hands on the floor, and just start to take those knees from side to side. Just releasing any tension that you could be having here. Good. Nice. Alrighty. So we're going to roll over those knees again, coming back into tabletop. And I want you to make sure that you have your blocks, okay? So make sure you've got your blocks handy at the top of your mat. So finding that tabletop position. And we're going to step, instead of through the center, we're going to step right foot to the outside of the right hand. Now, if you really struggle with this transition, stepping the foot forwards, get your hands already on the blocks and then step forwards. Okay, that should make it nice and easy. So once you're here, same rule with the knee. I want you to sink forwards. Okay, so we're not keeping the pelvis like we just did. We're doing the sinky forwards in the pelvis. Make sure that front knee is slightly behind or directly on top of that ankle. And press the foot down. Now, make sure your blocks are under your shoulders. So if they're too far back or too far forwards, just walk them so it's like a plumb line. Your wrist is directly under your shoulders. Now, hug your right knee into your right arm rather than letting it flop out to the side. And then just start to sink forwards. So again, our hips are in 2 different positions. You're going to get really used to these different positions, okay? So you've got front leg, which is in flexion and slight external rotation. Back leg is an extension, okay? So lizard's a great pose because you've got 3 different hip positions happening. And in our day-to-day kind of movements, there are 3 hip positions that make up about 80 to 90% of our hip movements, and that's flexion, external rotation, and extension. So all the hip movements that we're in right now. So in lizard, just like all the other poses, we don't want to be rounding our back. So lengthening the heart forwards. And I wouldn't look up to the sky here. I'd look slightly down so your neck is smooth. Now, some of you are going to be more mobile. So you can maybe drop onto the forearms on the blocks. If you start to really round your back, don't come so low. You want to keep the length in the spine. Now also, what's happening with that knee? Hug that knee into the center line. So remember those first movements that we did where we hugged the knee into the chest and then we took it out to the side? We're going to play around with those 2 movements. So one's not a very extreme external rotation, so it's very limited. And the next one, we're going to allow it. So let's just take 5 deep breaths here. And again, every exhale, with all these longer holds, like last week in the hamstring stretches, it's the exhale where you want to focus on deepening that stretch, deepening that sensation. And again, if that back knee is feeling sensitive, just prop it up, double up the mat, put a little rug or carpet underneath the mat before you even start. Good. Okay, so if you're down on the forearms, lift back up. You're going to take your right foot and you're going to turn it out at 45 degrees. So it's turning out on an angle. Then start to tip onto the outside edge of that foot. So your knee's now going out on an angle as well. Then sink forwards. And you might notice that you're getting a little bit more space in the knee. Now, if you want to, you can lower down. If you need to stay up nice and high, go for it. But you might find that you can get lower easier. Also, nice release, nice stretch on the shoulders. And then press into those blocks. Let's pull ourselves back up and we're going to step forwards, this time with the left foot. So even if your foot only comes partially, help the foot, help the foot. Start to sink forwards in the hips. Check that knee if it needs to walk further forwards, then walk it forwards. Make sure that those blocks are underneath your shoulders. So now right hip, okay, right hip is in extension. Left hip, whip, is in flexion, shortening, and slight external rotation. Hug that left knee into the left arm. Inhale to find length. Exhale, sinking a little bit more. Again, if it feels good, you can drop down on those forearms. Breathing here. Lengthen out the exhales. Good. If you drop down onto those forearms, come back onto the hands. I'll just show you from the side. So we're going to turn those left toes out at a 45, and then we're going to tip onto the outside edge of that foot. So the knee's now kind of flopping open. And then again, once you're there, sink forwards. Okay, you might be able to lower down. You might be able to get the blocks lower. Remember, your blocks have like 3 different heights. So you can play around with the height of those blocks. Your leg is now going into external rotation. So nice wide external rotation. Remember when we were pulling the knee into the armpit at the beginning of the class, we had more space. Again, try to straighten the spine as much as you can and breathe. Okay, if you come into a stretch, okay, and you cannot breathe, remember, breathing is yoga. If you're not breathing, you're not doing yoga. So bring yourself higher until you can breathe nice and comfortably, and maybe eventually you'll be able to get lower, but you're not going to be able to open up into the space, into the body, if you're not breathing properly. Your body will just seize up on you. Good. Slowly place that foot back down. Let's take our blocks on their highest setting and then step our knee back and just sit back, stretch the arms, releasing the hips. So if your knees get sensitive in any kind of way, I want you to grab a couple of pillows or double up your mat, because as we slide out, you're going to go onto the sensitive bits of the knees and they'll want to be padded. Okay, so you might need your blocks. You're all going to turn so that you're sideways on your mat now. And I would take your blocks in front of you. You're then going to take your knees, just move these out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Knees kind of as wide as feels comfortable here. Now your feet, you're actually going to flex them. I'll show you from behind. So you're going to flex your feet like this and slide the feet out rather than having them like child's pose. So child's pose, toes are together. In frog, you're flexing the feet and sliding them away. Now, if you're already feeling sensitive in the knees, stop the video, go get a couple pillows and put them under your knees. Now, the other thing, when we start to open up the legs, so we're going to start to let the knees slide away from each other. As we do this, we don't want to drop the hips back. We also don't want to take the hips forwards. You want to come straight down, okay? So the line that's connecting the two knees, you want to imagine that in the center of that line, the hips are coming straight down. So start to let the knees slide away from each other. Now, your whole body is going to be saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. So don't go too far. Just find the stretch. Maybe forearms rest on your blocks. Maybe you can get the arms on the floor. Maybe there's no way that's happening and you need to take your hands onto the blocks. Okay, so just finding that position again. If those knees are sensitive, prop them up. Now, to make it more intense, slide the heels further apart from each other. To make it less intense, bring the heels closer together. Breathe deep. Good, we'll stay here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good, press into the forearms or the hands, bring the heels close together and slowly start to bring the knees towards each other. Eventually bringing yourself back out of the pose and sitting on your bum. Good. Let's take our legs wide. So coming to sit on the bum. Now, if you feel like you're rolling backwards, take a block underneath the butt. Alrighty, so coming into that seated, wide-legged forward fold. Now, most of the poses we've been doing today have all been asymmetrical, which means that the hips are doing different things. But in this pose and the next following poses, we're going to do symmetrical stretches. So you're feeling into the kind of whole hip area doing the same thing. Where in an asymmetrical stretch, you're going to feel the real kind of differences between the two sides. Now, again, if you need to prop up the bum, grab a block, place it underneath the bum. We're going to leave the feet this time. So when we did this, when we were trying to really engage the hamstrings, we had those feet really, really engaged. We're not going to use the feet this time. So we're going to hinge forwards in the hips. So bum going behind you, coming into that anterior tilt. And we're going to let the whole body round. So you're going to let the chin flop. If you want to, you can take a block under the head. If the head is close enough, you can always take 2 blocks. And let the head rest. And so you're just flopping into this pose. No engagement in the legs. So targeting more connective tissue than muscles. And by connective tissue, I mean the fascia, the tendons, the joint structure. And that's what we're really trying to focus in here. We're going to stay here for about 60 seconds. So just settle into it. And that's why I said creating a little stack is really nice with the blocks. But don't worry if you're nowhere near there. If you're sitting up quite high, just rock and roll there. That's totally fine. Every time you exhale, just seeing if you can come a little bit deeper. For the last 30 seconds, if you are using blocks, maybe see if you can maneuver them, take one away, flatten it, and just see if you can come a little bit further. If that feels too much, then you can just bring the blocks back. And then from here, just slowly start to bring the spine back up. You might feel a bit like a tin man, that's all right. Nice. Move the blocks to the side. Take your hands underneath your knees and help your knees bend, okay? Now, if you're sitting on a block, I want you to stay put on that block. You're gonna bring the soles of the feet together and try to slide your heels as close to the pelvis as you can. Now, if when you do that, you feel like you're gonna literally rock and roll all the way onto your back, let the feet come a little bit further forwards. Now, in this pose, you're going to keep your spine totally straight. So you're not gonna let your spine round at all. So grab a hold of the feet, open them like a book, or grab the ankles or shins if you can't reach the feet. Elbows are gonna come towards the thighs. You're gonna lengthen the spine, and then you're gonna slightly hinge forwards. You might not move at all. But what I want you to focus on is pressing down through the elbows to get the knees towards the floor. I always see this in yoga classes, people coming into the pose like this, again, just completely closing off the whole front side of the body, exaggerating that kind of keyboard warrior. So you want to keep the chest shining forwards as if the chest was going to kind of go beyond the knees. Push down through those thighs. Really working on that external rotation. Breathe in, find length. And breathe out, try to push a little bit more in those elbows. Keep those shoulders from rounding, keep the chin from collapsing to the chest. And then from here, just start to walk the feet forward. So soles of the feet together, but you're creating a diamond shape. So feet are coming much further apart. If you want to come off your block, if it feels comfortable, you can. You're gonna take your arms, thread them underneath your shins, grabbing either the top of the shin or the top of the foot. Taking a big inhale here, and as you exhale, round the whole back. Use the arms like forklifts to pull on those shins to bring the head closer. Good, nice stretch in the upper back. So these are two variations of Baddha Konasana, butterfly pose. Really nice hip opener, really good pose for lower back pain as well. Your hips have so much to do with your back. Think about their position, literally what they connect to. And then releasing the tension on the legs, slowly, slowly, slowly start to rise up. Good. Hands come to the outside edges of those knees. Bring your bum about halfway up your mat. Hug your arms around your knees, curling yourself up, round, lengthening the spine. And then start to round over those thighs, holding onto those knees and slowly lowering down. Moving blocks out of the way if they're there, all the way onto your mat. And just holding onto the knees, let's start to draw some big circles. This is great for the lower back. You can probably feel the lumbar spine getting a nice massage here. And again, you're just juicing into the hips. And then switch it up, coming the other way. Nice. And then give yourself a nice big hug, bringing the forehead into those knees, hugging the thighs into the belly, and then begin to release into a super well-deserved Shavasana. Let the toes flop out so legs go naturally into external rotation, palms facing up. Start to go around, switching the light switches of activation off, of muscles, of joints, and of the mind. And again, just staying in your Shavasana as long as you'd like. And when you feel like you're ready to move, just slowly building this self-practice, bringing yourself out of your Shavasana and ending your practice.